To clarify at the start, despite the provocative title, I am not endorsing the Yeagerists or any group in Attack on Titan for that matter. The controversy surrounding this particular topic and eternally around the character Floch can get rather rough, and in the process, people tend to muddle the details and do little more than debase it by choosing sides in an actual conversation. The point of this video is then to expound upon their integral part of the narrative and depiction, for it provides a store of information that could be easily ignored if one looks at it in such a simple black and white dichotomy, one that has never characterized a situation given in Attack on Titan's world. First, we'll focus on the figurehead of the Yeagerists, Floch. Floch's initial introduction into the series is a very minor one, a mere background character or former 104th cadets that switched to the Survey Corps in light of the uprising and subsequent propaganda campaigns at the end of the uprising arc. His first real introduction, however, comes in the return of Shiganshina. Floch has long been a divisive figure, though originally for his rather benign action here, opposing the main cast for their actions. A self-professed coward, designated fodder, he also sees himself as the one that must speak the truth exactly because of his position. His speech in particular strikes Jean, who is reminded of his younger self, also called a coward and by his friend Marco. But through this, a great leader, because he is quote weak, so he understands the feelings of the weak. But the younger Jean and Floch now positioned themselves as the honest one. In this respect, Jean represented the common person, overtaken by Floch. We see much of this dynamic between Jean and Floch as they are given the most dialogue between each other out of anyone else in the Survey Corps. Even Floch's first appearance is him addressing Jean. The earliest example of the distance between the Corps and the rest of the military after the time skip comes in the scene where Sasha gets shot. Jean, the middleman that he is, immediately reacts by shooting Gabi. The rest of the military then go to beat her down, while Jean snaps back into shape and along with the only present Corps member Connie, tend to Sasha first and foremost, rather than seek violence onto the perpetrator. In that sudden moment of reflexive anger, he is aligned with the crowd over the Corps. This comes back later when Jean is tempted to join the Yeagerists to gain that peace and quiet he has always wanted. And he even saves Floch from death despite his choosing of the opposite disposition. The Survey Corps was originally the outlet for eccentrics, wild idealists, vagabonds, and revenge seekers. Their high casualty rate had placed them at the derision of the public, and it is exactly with the successful uprising and the introduction of people like Floch and Marlowe that this changes. Now, the public is on their side, and ordinary people flood to the Survey Corps, who, for the most part, become the core of the Yeagerists. But why is this? Simply because of the propaganda and their only recent successes? The common man wants nothing but peace, security, happiness. Why be so willing to throw away their lives and sacrifice now? Precisely because this reality has sunk in that the construction of new hecatombs must be required to protect that very prospect. This was the mantra of the Survey Corps, as exemplified in Erwin and the rallying cry of their cause, Shinzu wo Sasageo, dedicate your hearts. To dedicate one's heart meant taking that vow to sacrifice one's life for humanity, and within the context of pre-basement parody society, it was an unquestionable virtue. This popularity extends outside of the military soldiers, and also shows itself in citizens of the New Eldia. From the start, the public ferments displeasure against the military government for breaking their promise to truth and imprisoning Eren for his actions in Marley. Once the rumbling is commenced, the citizens pay little mind to its unintended harm to the cities, viewing it too as a sacrifice to preserve a greater peace for Eldia. Hence through all of this, Hanji remembers signs of the old government, for she is faced with political reality. The old idealism of the Survey Corps to quote-unquote save humanity has become antedated. No longer can there be a synthesis of harsh reality with the noble idealism that Erwin perfectly represented in both its cruelty and beauty. From Erwin's last valiant oblation to humanity within the walls, a moment where he surrendered his personal cause spawned the devil's advocate, Floch. Now that the truth of the world has been long revealed and sunk in, the situation has changed, but for many the context is mostly the same. Humanity within the walls is threatened by an enemy, one that is now incomparably larger than even the Titans. In the past, as it was best exemplified in Erwin, mass sacrifices were often needed to make even the smallest steps to strike back against the Titans and uncover the truth. Erwin, the man Floch had admired and followed into a suicide charge, was above all the one affected by his last speech. As Gustave Le Bon described, the only real tyrants that humanity has known have always been the memories of its dead or the illusions it has forged itself. In this charge, all of Floch's comrades and friends were shredded by rocks just as planned, and only he stood as the sole survivor. This formative event mirrors the attack and trust that became the defining attribute of our main cast's determination, especially in Jean, who was too pushed onwards by the death of his friend Marco. For both of them, they looked to make the death of their compatriots mean something by pushing forward to an end to the fighting. This may seem ironic for Floch, the de facto leader of the Yeagerists and primary supporter of destroying the rest of the world as a direct threat, but this is also exactly why he is so virulent on it. Floch and the Yeagerists focus much on the deaths of their comrades, or the possible future deaths of their own families and friends. Though Floch has come far since that decisive suicide charge years ago, he and the Yeagerists are motivated by the same prevailing mood: fear. This is why, though Floch mimics Erwin in his motivations as leader as it was from him that he learned it, the tone is noticeably divergent. What we see is not simply a congregation of crazed nationalists, but something closer to riotous peasants, and accordingly their sentiments are shared with the citizenry. Floch's charged speeches and initiatives are driven by desperation, because they are weak, and it is due to their inferiority that they come to find strength in numbers. By weak individuals forming into a crowd, the crowd then grows into a commanding force. Take for example Daz and Samuel, the former of which we see very early on in the series cowering in fear of the Titan invasion, now a Yeagerist himself. The Survey Corps are filled with strong individuals, and Jean sympathizes with their rival faction because he sees a bit of himself in them, his weaker self. Floch is not actually motivated by pride for his nation, for the nationalism expressed by Yeagerist members is an extension of their hopelessness and desire to not just be fodder dying for nothing. This is submission. They aren't trading their peace and safety to protect a world that was declared the enemy of paradise 4 years ago and is coming back to pay that toll. It could be argued that man's ability to trade their own security for their own higher purpose is what makes one great. But these people are not great. They are the common people, ineffectual in these greater missions alone, and recognize it fully. Thus, Floch ends up the most consistent character of anyone in the cast, and none on the opposing side are ever able to answer his advancements for Eldia, just as they were never able to deliver an answer to protect the island before, and how they could never properly rebuke Floch at the military funeral either. This is also where his interaction with Shadis becomes relevant, for Floch does know his place, as the weak who can only fulfill their will through subsuming themselves through a collective, who are only able to have power through the evocative faculty of the crowd. His dialogue with Kiyomi too has significance. He surprisingly agrees with her that their plan is flawed, for killing will continue even within Paradise, for he too wants for the killing to end, but still continues in the mission. This is because he knows his place, as a passive participant, a bystander to the carnage, both like and unlike Shadis, who was an individual bystander that did not bow himself to the mass, being unable to do anything. This is not even hypocritical in Floch's sudden proclamation that he will be the one to save Eldia in his last battle, for by that point he was the only one left. There was no crowd, and only he could possibly see through the mission. But for this he is reproved, made powerless, ultimately reduced to nothing but his own desperation by the time of his final moments. It is himself, stripped of the layers, a completely different demeanor from his plight in Shiganshina, but still the same in the end. A sole survivor whose only wish can be to protect the devil, for who else can protect them? It is easy to dismiss Floch as just this mad nationalist, an evil fascist, an imperialist egging on genocide, and an outright villain. But if this were all there was to it, his depiction in the series would be notably different to fit his role, as would be the rest of the Yeagerists. Floch's death is indubitably sad, and it's not confusing as to why. Just as Daz and Samuel's death were emotionally draining of the participants, in Floch's dying, Jean witnesses a piece of himself fade away, essentially tossing off the surefire claims to peace and safety. The safety of their island and small-time prospects could come so easily. That cozy life that Jean had always desired, which Floch could not abandon unlike Jean, thanks to his evolution across 4 years. It becomes ironic that for both of them it is Eren whom they follow, but two different Erens to converging paths. The difference in the end is that Jean still cares for his friend and is willing to rationalize his motives as a person, while Floch and the Yeagerists only care for how he can be useful as a devil for them, and the feeling is likely mutual. They are loyal to a devil, not to Eren, who has proven he cares not at all for some new Eldian empire. In his confrontation with Ymir Fritz, he proclaims to the will of the original King Fritz that the reign of the Titans will end by his hand. The most interesting aspect to the story of Attack on Titan is that it never hits you over the head with a black and white moral narrative. The world is a heterogeneous mixture as it truly would be, distinct forces and their contrasting viewpoints all bouncing off one another. In essence, the Yeagerist uprising is little different than the original uprising widely supported in Season 3, and yet the tone of it changes drastically. Can one blame the Yeagerists for their position? Hanji and Jean acknowledge that they couldn't, as few blamed those weak soldiers for wishing to revolt just to see their families again when the Titans were still the main enemy. In a world where there is no god to uphold a moral order, you could only stake your hope on a devil to reign on your behalf.